In step 20 of this IPL course on self-awareness, we move on from nature as a human being to talk about the other 50% of your mind, which is influenced by your nurture. That is the part that you can change. And if you understand how that process takes place, you can optimize your own approach to learning and become far more dynamic and flexible. So once it's born, we're now thinking about, okay, there's 50% of these neurons. We've still got, 100 billion of them or whatever left over. And this is where the learning takes place. And as I have said to you more often than not, pretty well all of that connecting up goes from the second you're born, because you have to learn to breathe within a couple of minutes. Well, no, you don't even get a couple of minutes. If you're not breathing within about 10 or 20 seconds, a nurse or someone smacks you on the ass and says, hey, you've got to start breathing now. And so you do. So 0, better to write 0. And then you go on learning. So if you look at the rate of learning from 0, your rate of learning is very, very high, and then it drops off, and it drops off when it gets to about there. And then it kind of ticks along. So this, I reckon, is about 7 years. So babies in their first years are learning all at a fantastic rate. If you want to teach a kid a language, a different language, a great time to do it is when they're about 4. 4 through 6, that's language. Now, child psychologists, anthropologists, and everything like that, they'll probably tell you, no, people start learning to talk much earlier. But the ability to learn a second language or a third or a fourth language is really in this period here. That's my own personal view. And I actually speak from experience, because by the time I was 7, because I lived in Egypt, I could speak English, but I also spoke very, very fluent Arabic. It was a second language for me. Now, the less good news is if you don't use it, you lose it. Use it or lose it. But then again, I was living abroad again in Belgium, a terrible place, when I was 10. So I was there from 10 to 11. And actually, I had to learn French. So what happened there was I had to learn a new procedures, as it were. It's a language. A language, if you think about it, is a replacement words. Is this a cat or is it a chat? Is this a hat or is it a chapeau? Whatever. So those are facts, those words. And then here is a process of joining the words up. Je n'ai pas un chapeau. Aussi, je n'ai pas un chat. That's a terrible word for me to have chosen. But so that's structuring a language, a sentence. And this is doable. So what happened then was that ticking along, and then I had a spike to learn French. And then I left Belgium, French. And this was Arabic. Now here's what's interesting about the mind. When you learn something is important, because these connections, if you learn a language at this age, there's a good chance you'll remember it. It'll go into an automatic part of your mind, and you'll be able to use that language pretty well at the drop of a hat. Not perfectly, because you'll be talking with what you learned while you were, in my case, 10 or 11 years old. So I can jabber away to someone with a French person, but my vocabulary and my grammar is all childlike, really. Now, the Arabic is gone. I cannot speak Arabic. I've tried to relearn it. I've done quite a lot of work in the I'll call it the Middle East. They hate you calling it that. The, Dubai, Lebanon, it's Saudi Arabia, all those countries. And they all use Arabic, and I can't. And I tried before. I used to go off to learn it. I couldn't do it. I was too old. I was about 55 by then. My capacity to learn languages was just rubbish. Perhaps in real need, you might be able to. Why am I going on about this? I think what I'm going on about it is learning. Learning is tied in with when. When, in terms of age, and why. So, is it a need? So it's needs-based. So I went to this school, and pretty well all the lessons were delivered in French. So I needed to learn French. Now, I didn't want to learn French. I had to do it. So it was what's called needs-driven. When, as I've talked to you about the ages and so on. I'm rambling a little bit, but I hope the points are there. So we retain the capacity here to learn facts and procedures. And meanwhile, everything we learn, assuming it has value, it gets parked in the brain. I've drawn my awful picture of the brain before, but here's your brain, certain stuff coming in here, a lot of stuff coming into your head. If you think about where the sensors are on your body, okay, you've got sensors in your hands and your fingers and your toes and so on, but the humans try to put the sensors as close as possible to the brain. So here, you've got your sight, so your eyes are stuck pretty close to your brain. Your ears are over here, a sound. You've got a tongue, there's taste. And you've got a nose on the front, and smell. So then the paths through into your mind are pretty short. Our bodies have been optimized. Where our sensing organs are has been optimized to be as close as possible to the place where the information processing goes on. Now, here's an interesting thing. You have in your mind a special area which is called the reticular, this bit here, which I encourage you to look up. And it's called the Reticular Activation System. So it's a special part of your mind that is it's there basically to look at all the inputs that come in. It's kind of like a master first pass decider of what to do with all the inputs. So all the inputs are initially processed, even though I've drawn them like that. They do in fact have to pass through your RAS. They've got to go in there first. And only then do they go up into your mind. And what happens to them is your reticular activation system makes decisions on behalf of you as a person. It decides what to let through. So it's like a guard or a gatekeeper. If you think of your mind as a kind of fortress with gates, so reticular activation system is effective. It's a guarded gate. And it says, okay, and it's a guarded gate for inputs. There's a long line of inputs all coming along, trying to go through the gate into your mind. Now, some of the inputs have got VIP treatment. They've got a bunch of aspects to them which already come with an entry pass. On some subway systems and so on, you can have an electronic card that just lets you walk through the gate. So there are a certain number of inputs that come in, and the RAS system says, yeah, you're okay, just go straight on in. But there's others where it needs to think about it and what it's going to let through. So, and there's an awful lot that it just says, no, you can't come in. Because only, let's say 1 in 1,000, those aren't the actual numbers, but maybe only lets 1 in 1,000 of the input people who are coming along into the mind, into the fortress of the mind. And the rest get dumped. They get ignored. Now, because you've got guards on the gate, you have to teach the guards rules. So the guards on your gate are taught rules, and they're taught the rules here, during this period here. Well, especially from about there to there. What to let in.
Another way to think about this is border officials between countries who are there to control, especially these days, immigration of people wanting to travel from one country into another. So if you have what's called a passport, then you're entitled to go into that country with very little problem. But if you don't have a passport, then in these modern times, it's amazing what people will do to try to get into a given country. Very often, it involves dangerous journeys and risking your life and all sorts of things. And whichever country you're in, you can think about the borders between, let's say, Mexico and America, or in Britain, where I am now, between Europe and into the UK, or if you're in North Africa, it's getting into a terrible boat to get into Europe or Afghanistan, or pretty well any country where if you want to get in, you've got to answer a lot of questions, and your mind is just the same. Your mind has a lot of questions and tests that it uses before it will let in new thoughts and new ideas, because there are consequences for the subconscious mind, which basically runs the fortress of your mind, that it needs to feel secure that the people, the inputs that have been let in are going to be good for the community and not bad for the community. So you can think about it that way if you like, and in the next steps we're going to be helping you understand much more about what kind of tests the guards to the fortress of your mind are using. And it may seem to you, what, so many tests? But these tests do exist. And it's the Institute of Practical Learning has been researching this area for 30, 40 years to understand what all those tests are, which are in effect barriers to learning. So if you want to learn within the fortress of your mind, you need to know what the guards outside your mind are stopping happening, and don't take it for granted that everything you see and hear will get let in, because it won't. And the consequences of that are you just simply will not remember what those inputs were.